We're going to start today Yud Amud Beis. That's 10b, towards the bottom. At the Mishnah. Get to start in the Mishnah. It's easy. Rabbi Yehuda says, what does he say? Baitkin or Yudalad. You search for chametz the night of the 14th. That means the night before the 14th. Erev Pesach. Yudalad Shachris. You search again. Yudalad in the morning. That's when you wake up. It doesn't say exactly what time. B'shas beer. And you search again when you have to do the beer, when you burning the chametz. When do you burn the chametz? At the beginning of the 6th hour. The Chacham say, the Chacham say, if you didn't search on the night of the 14th, then you're right. Then you search on Yudalad during the day. If you didn't search on the 14th, then you search B'tay Chamayid. Rashi says B'tay Chamayid means the 6th hour. B'shas beer. What Rabbi Yehuda called B'shas beer. What happens if you didn't search B'tay Chamayid? Yivdek la'achar Hamayid. Rashi says from 6 hours and on until it gets dark. Tosfos here is bothered by Rashi's pshat. The main issue is you can translate Mayid however you want. Mayid just means a time. But if Rabbi Yehuda says B'shas beer, that means the 6th hour. So then the Chachamim should not call it something else. The Chachamim should call it B'shas beer. So if the Chachamim are saying B'sei Chamayit, Tosfos says it must mean during Yom Tov. Why? What compelled Rashi to give such a doichek? To say that B'tay Chamayit means the 6th hour or after the 6th hour? He says that the Bedika, Tosfos explains Rashi. Says that we had a machlekes at the beginning of the Masechta, machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Why do you do Bedikas chametz? Rashi said so that you don't violate Bal Yirah, Bal Yimotzei. And Tosfos said so Shemi Yimtza Gulas Kiyafa, you might end up eating it. So for Tosfos it says the Bedikas you might end up eating it, so you have to search the whole Pesach, you shouldn't eat it. If you had chametz there, you have to search. Possibly there's chametz. According to Rashi, that you search so that you don't violate Bal Yirah, so that could only be before Pesach. Why? What happens on Pesach? Still Bal Yirah, right? Unless maybe, what did Rashi say at the beginning? What happens with Bal Yirah once Pesach starts? Rashi says Shleyaver Lav Bal Yirah Bal Yimotzei. I'm not sure how that's going to help. I assume if you destroy it or if you find it, you'll get rid of the you get rid of the Yisr. I don't know. Okay. So now, this is not going on the end of the Mishnah. This is going on earlier. Whenever you do a bedika, if you have bread left over, so you have to put it aside so that you don't have to search for it a second time because someone moved it around or or one of the kids. So you put it aside so that you shouldn't have to search for it again. We always put it on top of the fridge in a bag tied up or something. Right. Yeah. We had a discussion if you have to search for another 10 or, oh no, that was talking about if it was a pile of 10. Okay, now the Gemara says, my time with the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda that says you have to search for chametz 3 times? It comes like this whole big job. I mean, even once is a big job, but 3 times is huge. So Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna the Amri Tarbayu connected Shalish Hashbasos Shabbatayra. Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna. They say it says three mentions of the Torah prohibitions. One is la yira, bal yira. One is la yimatzeh, and one is tashbisus armi batechem. You should destroy. Oh, 3 psukim. So 3 psukim tells me that you have to search and destroy 3 times. La yira lachachametz, la yira lachasar, shivas yam la yimatzeh bebatechem, ach b'yamarish and tashbisus armi batechem. So those 3 prohibitions tell me that you have to destroy or search and destroy the chametz 3 times. Masav Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef has a question. Rabbi Yehuda Imer Kolshlei Badak B'Shleisha Prakam Alalu Shuvein Abayde. Quotes a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says that if you didn't search for chametz during these 3 times, then you don't search anymore. Sounds like he's arguing with the Chachamim that the Chachamim say you still search b'toich hamayid, and Rabbi Yehuda says that you don't continue to search b'toich hamayid. That means that the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is not about if you have to search 3 times; it's about if you have to continue to search after the Zman Isser. Right. So similar to that would be the 3 times. Oh. Yeah. Rav Nosson is asking that we should, if it says 3 times, we should use it for like Leisavashal Gedeba Chalevim 3 times. That would tell me you can't eat, you can't cook, and you can't have enough. Yeah. These are basically, you shouldn't have. Over there it says don't cook. Over here it says can't own, you can't see, and you should destroy. So each of them is telling me some sort of destruction. Can't own it, okay, I have to destroy it. You can't see it, okay, I have to destroy it. I have to destroy it. Okay, so what does it mean you have to destroy it? What do you destroy? How do you destroy it 3 times? So he says you destroy it 3. There's 3 different times when you have to search for it. So the problem is that we, according to the Brisa, it appears that Rabbi Yehuda is only talking about. He's only arguing with the Chachamim after the 3 times, after those 3 periods. Do you need to still continue to search? We see that the Machlekes Rabbi and Chachamim is not about if you have to search 3 times or 1 time. It's about if after the Zman Isser, if you still continue to search for chametz. Marzutra Masni Hachim. Marzutra has the same question. He just poses it with one more detail. He says it like this. Masav Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef asked the question. Rabbi Yehuda Imer Kolshlei Badak Be'echad Mishleisha Prakam Alalu Shuvein Abayde. Anyone that didn't search during one of these times then doesn't continue to search. Alma b'shavein abayda kudapligi. We see that the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is not about if you have to search once or you have to search 3 times. It's about if you didn't search, do you continue? Can you make it up by searching during Yom Tov, or according to Taisus, or after the Zman Isser, according to Rashi? El Rabbi Yehuda nami im leibada kamar. Rabbi Yehuda also says im leibada. We learned the Mishnah incorrectly. I deliberately did that so the Gemara's question should make sense. But what the Mishnah says, or the way we're supposed to read the Mishnah now, is Rabbi Yehuda says you search for chametz the night of the 14th. Add in the words, if you didn't do that, then you search for it in the morning. If you didn't do it in the morning, then you do it b'shas habiyah. The Chacham say the same thing. If you didn't search at night, you search in the morning. If you didn't search in the morning, then you do b'shas habiyah. The only thing is the Chacham continue. If you didn't do it b'shas habiyah, you continue b'teichem, right? And that's the machlekes, that continuation between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham. And now the machlekes is a little bit different. Mar Savar, Rabbi Yehuda holds, this master holds, Mikame Isura in, Basar Isura light. Before the time of Isser, you search for chametz. But after the time of Isser, don't search for chametz. You need to avoid it if you don't want the answer. So don't search. because you're going to find it. When you find it, there's a problem. You may end up eating it. So we say avoid getting into that issue because you may end up eating it. Don't search. You say, oh yeah, I didn't check that cabinet. Don't check it, because if you open it up, you say, oh, look at that, it's some a donut. Okay. But Rabbanan Sabri Legazin, the Rabbanan say no, there's no Gezerah. You continue to search. You might have the Chametz say you have to search for it. Okay, now, the next Gemara is just going to discuss, according to Rabbi Yehuda, do we make a Gezerah or do we not make a Gezerah that you might end up doing something else? We're discussing the stringency or the leniency of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Gezerahs. Do we confuse things and say, oh, we have to make it usher because people may end up doing what's worse, so don't do it at all, or something like that. We start off with, Umi Gaza Rabbi Yehuda Dilma Asi Lamechel Minei. Does Rabbi Yehuda have this concern that if you're involved with something, you're going to eat it? Does he make that Gezerah? In our Mishnah, he does. But does he do this in other places? Because we have other sources where he doesn't make a Gezerah. And then we're going to question, basically the assumption is, maybe we didn't get the pshat in the Mishnah right. But we learned in the Mishnah, in Menachos, we should carve Aimer once the Aimer was brought. Okay, the Aimer is the offering, the barley offering that's brought on the 16th of Nisan, the second day of Pesach. Once the Aimer is brought, then you're allowed to eat the new grain. You're allowed to eat the new grain, the new crops. Before that, you're not allowed to eat the new crops. This is the environmentalists like this. You have to finish up the old before you start taking the new stuff. So you have to wait for the 16th. Now, people would go out. Yotzin, people would go out once the Aimer was brought, the 16th of Nisan, and they would see that the markets of Yerushalayim were already filled with flour and toasted grain. This is like the pizza shops after Pesach. How did you get the pizza ready? So we know they sold it and whatever. But over here, how did they get it ready? They already have toasted grain and they have flour. You just brought the Aimer. How did the marketplace get filled? It must be that it was done before the Aimer was brought. Now, if it was done before the Aimer was brought, it only says you're not allowed to eat it. But if you're going to be involved with the grain, you may end up eating it. So the first opinion here says, Shaloi b'ratzin chachamim. We're on top of Daf Yomi. That was against the will of the sages. Why against the will of the sages? They don't want you to eat grain. They want you to do all of the grain production. Any involvement with grain should only be after the Aimer is brought. Before the Aimer is brought, you may end up eating it. You're not allowed to eat it. That's the Reb Meir. That's Reb Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer b'ritzayin chachamim hayois, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. B'ritzayin chachamim. There was no problem. There's no problem to do it. You weren't eating it. We see that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make a gzeira that you may end up eating it. That's a direct contradiction to our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we said that don't search for chametz after the Zman Yisr because you may end up eating it. Rabbi Yehuda says you can cut the grain before the Aimer, and we're not concerned that you're going to eat it. This is chametz and this is grain. It's a contradiction. Amar Rava, the Bach switches it to Rabba. You'll see in the flow of the Gemara that besides it probably has a girsa like that, but it makes sense. Rabba says, Shani Chadash. Rabba says an interesting answer. He says that by the grain we don't have an issue because we tell you that you have to harvest it in a way that will always remind you that you shouldn't be eating it. Why? Because normally, how do you harvest grain? You take a sickle and you cut the stalks. Over here, you're only allowed to harvest it with your hand. You have to pull it out, rip it off with your hand. Any grain that's done before the Aimer, you're not allowed to cut with the sickle. You have to pull it off. So if you're going to cut it off with the sickle, you're going to cut it off with your hand. You have to pick it, pluck it. So then you're going to remember not to eat from it. So we have a special way of doing this. Why couldn't you have searched for the chametz with one eye closed or something? I don't know. But anyway, they made a special way of harvesting the grain to remind you. Amalei Abaya says, Abaya is a student of Rabbah. He says, Tenach b'shas ktifa. I get what you're saying. When it came to the harvesting, you had a siman. You had to do it with your hand. That's going to remind you. What about the rest of the production? I mean, how long does the harvesting take? I don't know how long it takes, but whatever it is, you still have to get it home, and you have to grind it. It turned into flour. You had to toast it. All of that time, what were you doing? You weren't picking it with your hand. It was just regular. It was just regular in your box, and bring it in a basket home. Over there, you might have eaten it. The Gemara answers, Rabbah's probably answering Abaya. Actually, the way that the production, the way that they processed this grain was also with the shimei to remind you. So therefore, over there was no problem that you may end up eating it, because how did they grind it? They had to use a hand mill as opposed to a water mill or a mill that was used with animals. So I don't know. Robert Nelson has a question. This question is, maybe Chadash is less of an issue, like Chametz. Chametz is Iser b'masha. Chadash may be less of an issue. So you're asking a question that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make a gzeira there, but he does by Chametz. Maybe it's because Chametz is strict. I don't know the answer. The pshat in Iser b'masha though means that when it mixes into another pile, it makes everything Iser. We're not really worried that he's going to a whole See, the problem is that usually we say that something is aser because ayis. By chametz we say it's also aser because ayis. But if it falls into a pot, a little drop, it's aser the whole pot, even b'mashu. It's not that chametz is aser to eat a mashu. Not that it's aser to eat a mashu. I don't say bittul and it's aser b'mashu. It's not aser b'mashu. It's aser. It makes everything aser b'mashu. So that just means that it's not batal. But if I eat less than a shia, less than a kazayas of chadash, or less than a kazayas of chametz, so probably that would go under the machlekes of Rabbi and Reish Lakish if I say Chati Shir Asr Torah. What do I say? I think regarding that, it may be the same thing, although chametz is eating chametz is kares, right? Yeah. Okay. So that would be a stringency, but that won't make a difference in the size. Okay. So what do you do over here? How do you make a siman so that you shouldn't end up eating from it? The harvesting was done with picking with the hands. The grinding was done with the hand grinder. And the sifting was done when you turn the sifter upside down. You know, the sifter has like a bucket or something, and you sift. This was, you turned it upside down and you had to sift it upside down. So mamish, they made a siman for you to make sure that you don't end up eating it when you're involved in it until the Eimer is brought. Al Gabi Nafer, Rashi explains, Rashi says you have to turn it upside down. Eloha D'Tanan, okay, you answered that up. We have another problem now. It says, Kaitin Beis HaShlachim V'Sheba Makim Avaloi Gaitrin. You're allowed to harvest. Now, Kaitrin, when it says Kaitrin, it means that you're harvesting mamish. It means with a sickle. You're using a regular instrument to harvest. And you're allowed to harvest the grain from the Beis HaShlachim, which is a field that requires irrigation, where the grain doesn't grow as well. It's not as good. In Sheba Makim, or in the valleys, these you're allowed to harvest. Now, why are you allowed to harvest this before the Eimer? So Rashi brings that there's two psukim. One pasuk says that you do the harvest and then you bring the Eimer. Sounds like you harvest before the Eimer. Another pasuk says that that the Eimer is the first of the harvest. So the Gemara explains that contradiction in Pesachim, and it says that from the areas where you bring the Eimer grain from, you're not allowed to harvest. But there are other areas where you don't bring the Eimer from because the grain isn't the highest quality. Over there, you're allowed to harvest beforehand. Problem is, you're allowed to harvest, you may end up eating it. Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara over there in Menachos says that that's actually the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, which messes everything up for us, because we were saying that Rabbi Yehuda holds you may end up eating it, and here we're saying that you're allowed to harvest mamish. It's a kasha on Rabba's teretz. Rabba said that you're harvesting in a different way. Here it says you're allowed to harvest this grain in a regular way. What can you say to this? How are you going to say this? There should be a gzeira according to Rabbi Yehuda. You may end up eating that grain. Ela Amar Abaya. Rather, Abaya says. Abaya gives another teretz. He says, Chadash badal minei, chametz le badal minei. Chadash, look, you have several months where you have to be careful not to eat chadash. Chametz, you have 1 week of the year. So chadash, everyone knows. Is it yashan? Every restaurant they go into, is it yashan? Is it yashan? So it's on your mind the whole time. Everyone is careful with yashan. No one is involved with it. It's a big chiddush that once you're allowed to eat the chadash. So, but chametz, you're involved the whole year. So therefore, it's so slight, it's so easy that the person makes a mistake. It's always mutter. Just once a year, it's not. So that's why leibadul minei, we have a concern that you're going to end up eating it. Amar Rava says, he has a question. He's discussing with Abaya. That's why I think even if the Bach didn't have a different girsa, and he just changed it because of the flow of the Gemara, this would be the reason. Because first, Rabba gave us a teretz that the grain was harvested differently. Comes along Abaya and has a question on that, and he gives his own teretz that chadash is different because people won't end up eating it by mistake. And now Rava is now talking to Abaya, not Rabba. Now Rava is talking to Abaya. He says, Abaya, you answered half a question. The Rabbi Yehuda had the kasha. The Rabbanan like kasha. You had a question of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. By us in the Mishnah in Pesachim, it says according to Rabbi Yehuda, you may end up eating while you're doing the search. And by the grain of the chadash, you said that you won't eat while you're involved with it. Okay, so you gave a teretz. But the Rabbanan said by us that you don't make a gzeira. You don't make a gzeira ban the chametz. You're allowed to continue searching throughout the Zman Yisr of chametz. And then Rabbi Meir, at the beginning of the Mishnah that we quoted from Menachos, it says that when they went out into the streets of Yerushalayim, in the marketplaces, they saw that there was grain over there, toasted grain, and they said that it was shloi bratzim chachamim. Why is it shloi bratzim chachamim? Probably because people may end up eating it. 1 second, what's going on? That means that the Rabbanan, we're associating Rav Meir with the Rabbanan. We're saying that there is a gzeira that you may end up eating it. So why by chametz was there no gzeira? You said that there's a kasha in Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. But what about the kasha of the chacham and the chachamim in Rav Meir's the chacham? The Rabbi Yehuda the Ruben like kasha kiddushan. I get it. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda, there's no kasha because we just answered. Because like Abaya says, probably. That's the teretz. That badal minay, you're separated from chadash but not from chametz. The Rabbanan nami like kasha uatzmi machsal level surf and mechel kachum minay. It was a very interesting story. By the chadash, I'm preparing the food, so therefore I may end up eating it while I'm preparing it. It's snack time. I'm toasting grains. So while you're making the popcorn or something, you take a bite. But over here, you're not preparing food. You're going after it with a torch. You're going to burn it. You're not going to eat from it. So why in our Mishnah was there no gzeira? Because who atzmi machzor level surfer? You're trying to destroy it. We don't make a gzeira. You're going to eat it. Over there, you're trying to prepare it for food. So over there, we're concerned you're going to eat it. It's a good spot. Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi gives another teretz. He says, "The Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda lekasha kemach bekali knan." Over there it says, what was in the marketplace? Flour and toasted grain. You can't eat flour and you can't eat toasted grain. Toasted grain is just prepared to be, just prepared to be ground into flour. Toasted flour. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I remember in brachas we said that. Oh, in brachas we said toasted flour required a bracha. I don't know if the toasted grain required a bracha. So, kloyas. I thought toasted grain was a treat. Kloyas.
So
Anyway,
grape nuts,
is that what that is? It's toasted grains.
Cheerios.
I guess you have to ask the kids if that's edible. Grape nuts. There's going to be different opinions there. So Rav Ashi says it's not really edible anyway. So what's the whole shaila? The Gemara says Hadar Rav Ashi bedusahi. You have to take this out of the Beis Medrash. There's two versions to this Gemara whenever it says it. It's either bedusa or berusa. Berusa means take it outside, and bedusa means that it's not true. Either Rav Ashi never said it, or it's a mistake that Rav Ashi said it. I get it. If once it's toasted, you can't eat it. Fine, but but they had to prepare it. While they're preparing it, it was edible. They could have snacked on it, and we didn't make a gzeira there. How could you say that there's no kasha in Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda says there's no gzeira there by the chadash, by the new grain. What are you going to tell me? It's not edible. But before you toasted it, it was edible. Maybe you say that you had to pick it differently. The way Rava said. You're not going to get out of this problem. Like telling Rav Ashi's teretz, it's not going to work. We're saying we had a kasha on this, and we didn't have a teretz. We said that it says clearly that you are allowed to harvest with a sickle from a field that needs irrigation or from the valleys, and we didn't have any sim there. So it's impossible to tell me, once it's toasted, it's not edible. What about the whole time up till then? You tell me that you had to pick it by hand. I have that Mishnah that we said clearly that you're allowed to harvest with a sickle. So you have to go back to Abaya's teretz. Ella de Rav Ashi bedusi. Rather, Rav Ashi is not correct. Or the teretz of Rav Ashi is not correct. Yeah. And if you remember, Josh, when Rabbi Shapiro was here, when he praying for us, he spoke about that every word of the Gemara is the words of Hashem. Even when the Gemara says Ela de Rav Ashi, Hadar Rav Ashi bedusahi, it's also the words of Hashem. Hashem said Rav Ashi's teretz, and he also said the Hadar Rav Ashi bedusahi. He said both. Okay. V'chol heichad leibadol minei migazer Rav Yehuda. Based on the Shla, he writes this. Says that the whole Torah is Shemaisav Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is names of Hashem. It's just different combinations, secret combinations, Kabbalistic combinations. That's why we have an interesting Gemara. I get where somewhere in Baba Kama, I think. That's right. It says Rabbi Yaakov Chayev, and the Gemara says Rabbi Yaakov Chayev. What did Rabbi Yaakov do? So it says no. Rabbi Yaakov Omer Chayev. Rabbi Yaakov says. So they ask, why didn't you edit that out? You put in just the Omer. That's a clear correction. And the Gemara has to tell us that back and forth. It says no, because it's really names of Hashem. On the Torah has 70 interpretations. Everything could be translated Kabbalistically, and so for the pshat we should have edited that, but for other interpretations you can't do that. Okay, now we ask, V'chol heichad leibadol minei migazer Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rabbi Yehuda make a gzeira every time leibadol? We just gave a teretz, Rav Ashi's, Abaya's teretz, that if people are separated from it, like by chadash, so then there's no gzeira that you're going to eat it. But if they're not separated from it, they're not removed from it, and it's close to them, something that they would do frequently, like chametz, then there's a gzeira. Is this accurate that Rabbi Yehuda always makes a gzera like that? But we have a Mishnah in Shabbos. In the Steinsal's Gemara, there's a great picture. There's a oil lamp with a glass upside down bowl over it. There's probably a small hole in that glass that the oil would drip down to fill up the lamp that's underneath it. So here, the Mishnah tells us that you can't take an eggshell, fill it with oil, and let it drip into the lamp, to the oil lamp, to have a second reservoir of oil to be able to let the lamp last longer. Why not? The reason is because you may take some of that oil out for your meal, because they would eat the oil, they would burn the oil, they would eat the oil also. They would use it with their bread, like they do in the restaurants. Everyone does oil with the bread. So, what's the problem if you take oil out? You're mechaber, you're extinguishing the fire, you're making the fire go out sooner when you take the oil out. So you're not allowed to put this eggshell next to the lamp to have a second reservoir, because you may end up taking some oil out. Even if that shveiferis, that tube or that reservoir that you're using, is made out of clay, and clay becomes gross once it's used, and you probably won't stick your bread into it. Nevertheless, we're concerned that you may, stick your bread into it. And Rabbi Yehuda matter. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a problem. What's going on over here? What's our issue? Our issue is that Rabbi Yehuda held that if you're loy badal minei, if it's something that you eat regularly, then we have a concern that you may eat it now. Comes along the Mishnah in Shabbos and says that Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned that you may eat the oil. Why not? I eat oil the whole year. Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda make a gzeira? I may end up taking it from the oil. The Gemara answers, the Shabbos mivdal b'dili. Shabbos is different. Yeah? Nothing. That chumrah of Shabbos. See, that's why we're not going to get the teretz of the chumrah of Pesach. It's the chumrah of Shabbos which makes me separated from it. It makes it worse. It makes it that I don't have to be concerned, because Shabbos is more strict than Pesach. Because on Shabbos, I guess on Shabbos you do a malacha at skila. So because of the chumrah of Shabbos, Rabbi Yehuda says no one's going to take the oil, but on Pesach you may end up eating the chametz that you find, even though you're trying to burn it. The Gemara now says, we're getting a little sidetracked over here. We say, "Barami the Shabbos ha-Shabbos." Let's ask a contradiction Shabbos onto another Mishnah in Shabbos. It says like this: the Tanya, Chevel Delisha Nifsak, Lo Yehi Kaisrei Ela Oinvay. If you have a bucket and the rope broke, the rope of the bucket broke, you can't tie it back on with a knot because that's a problem. Kesher on Shabbos is a malacha. Ela Oinvay, you make a bow. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kairich of Pundai by Paskia. Benu. Says you can put it in a pundia. This is a pundasek. This is a money belt, or psakia, or is a sash, some other sort of belt, ribbon or something. As long as you don't make a bow. What's the problem? Rabbi Yehuda here is concerned, the way the Gemara is understanding it, is that if you make a bow, that's a gzeira that you may end up making a real knot. What are we seeing? That Rabbi Yehuda makes a gzeira on Shabbos. Don't make a bow because you may end up making a knot. But before he said, you don't make a gzeira on Shabbos, that you may end up taking the oil out. Kasha de Rabbi Yehuda, because here he says that we have a gzeira not to make a knot, but he also says we don't have a gzeira that you're going to end up taking the oil. And kasha de Rabbanan, there's a kasha de Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say you don't make a gzeira, a bow, because of a knot. You're allowed to make a bow. But over there they said, don't use a shveiferes because you may end up taking oil. You may end up taking oil out. So it means that they do make a gzeira. Gemara says, the Rabbanan are the Rabbanan like kasha. Shemen b'shemen mechlaf, and even b'kshir like mechlaf. The Rabbanan are strict about the oil because, yeah, you're taking oil from this plate. You may end up taking oil from that eggshell. But a bow and a knot is two different things. If you're going to be making a bow, that's different than making a knot. We're not concerned that because we allow you to make a bow, you're going to make a knot. The Rabbi Yehuda like kasha. The whole premise of this was false. There's no kasha in Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Time of the Rabbi Yehuda, lav mishum de gazer aniva to kshira. The reason for Rabbi Yehuda was not because there's a gzeira. If we allow you to make a bow, you may end up making a knot. You probably remember from Erevin. What does Rabbi Yehuda hold? We had this about the tefillin. Rabbi Yehuda holds el mishum de kasavar aniva gufei kshirahi. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a bow is a knot. It's not a gzeira. The whole premise was wrong. The reason why we had a question is we thought that a bow is a gzeira that you may end up making a knot. Turns out Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that a bow is a knot. That's why you're not allowed to make a bow. It's not a gzeira. We were asking a question that it looks like Rabbi Yehuda over here says you make a gzeira. It's not a gzeira. That's the original din that you're not allowed to make a bow. Okay. V'rami Rabbanan ad Rabbanan. Let's ask a question of the Rabbanan and the Rabbanan. We have another Mishnah that says that you can tie up the bucket with a sash, but you can't use a rope. For Rabbi Yehuda Matter, Rabbi Yehuda says you can use a rope. Chevel demai. What type of rope is this? If you say it's a regular rope, Rabbi Yehuda Matter. That's a big problem. It's impossible to say it's a regular rope. How do you have any opinion that says you can tie a rope onto a bucket? That's a knot. And if it's a regular knot that you're not going to remove, see, Rabbi Yehuda allowed you before to use a belt or a sash. He says that you're not going to end up leaving it there because you need your belt. So it's just temporary. Kesher sheina shel kayama is not a problem if it's not a permanent knot. But over here, if it's going to be a regular rope, it's going to be a permanent knot. So you need a new pshat. What's going on over here? El pshita de gardi. It must be a rope of something that's used. It's a weaver's rope. I don't know exactly what he uses it for, but he's not going to leave it there. So it's not a regular rope. That's okay. That's first of all. The Gazru Rabbanan chevel de gardi to chevel de alma, and the Rabbanan make a gzeira. A chevel de gardi. If we're going to allow you to use a weaver's rope, we're going to allow you. They may end up using a different rope. You see, the Rabbanan say that you make a gzeira, and before they said that there was no problem, you're allowed to make a bow. We didn't make a gzeira, a bow. Here we say if you use a weaver's rope, you're going to end up using a regular rope. And before we said don't make a knot, but you can make a bow. Why don't we say that there's a gzeira if you allow you to make a bow? You're going to make a knot. The Gemara says chevel bechevel michla. Ropes and ropes that's interchangeable. And even b'kshira like mechlapa, but a bow and a knot is still different. Okay. So the Gemara has to do with people using a tie for a gartel. As they walk into shul. Does anyone have a gartel? No gartel? Okay, they take the tie. Or worse, they use a phone charger. They take all types of things. Yeah, ropes are interchangeable. Okay. And anywhere, now we're taking the other side. We're asking the other way. We keep asking questions like this on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda started off saying that we make a gzeira not to search for chametz during the Zman Isser because you may end up eating it. So we said, but that's only by chametz because chametz lay badal minei, and you're used to eating chametz the whole year. But other things that are badal minei, then there's no problem. So, for example, chadash, you're allowed to be involved with chadash before, and it's not a problem because you're badal minei. So now we ask, anything that's badal minei, like chadash, there's no gzeira that you're going to end up eating it. Are they going to end up doing something wrong over there? It says Vatanya, but we have a brisa. Is it really a brisa? What is this valid? Vatanan, it's a Mishnah. The Bach changes it. Bechar she'achsei dam. If you have a bechar that is ill, one of the expressions over here is achsei dam. I don't know, it's grabbed by blood, but something's going on with it, and they need to do bloodletting. Afilu mace, even if it's going to die, ein mekisim leidam. You're not allowed to do bloodletting. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Rabbi Yehuda says you may end up making a mum. Depends where you do the bloodletting. If you do a cut on the lip, the eye, the bloodletting, you have to make an incision. So you may end up doing it in a spot that's going to make a mum. The Chachamim say, Yak is a bilvad shlayat my mum. We don't have a gezerah. Do it in the right spot. Rabbi Yehuda, it has a gezerah. So what are we saying? The question here is that there's a concern that Rabbi Yehuda's gezerahs, we said before, was only on things that I'm used to doing the whole time. Yeah, for health purposes. And here I have a bechar, an animal that's a carbon, that I'm not supposed to make a mum in it, because if I do, I'm making a mum bekachim. And the truth is, it belongs to a kohen once there's a mum in it, and he can eat it without bringing it as a carbon. So, but I have a concern that he's going to end up making a mum directly. If he makes a mum directly, then it's a problem. So we say don't do any bloodletting because you may end up making a mum. Why? I don't do that the whole year. I do mumim and karbanos the whole year. It's your concern. It's something that I do the whole time. I never do that. So why can't I do bloodletting on the back leg? It's not. What's the big deal? It's not going to be a mum. So the answer is Hashem mitaych shehu bahol al mamayna yamrinan yisharisle b'makom shenaisim b'imam masal mev b'makom sheisim b'imam. Where it gives an interesting svara. We said one svara why Rabbi Yehuda makes a gzeira is because you're used to eating it the whole year. Another svara that Rabbi Yehuda has is if there's going to be a loss of money. Adam Baal al Mamayna, he is agitated, that he is nervous, that he's going to lose money, so he's going to end up doing it in a way that's going to make a mum. We don't trust him then. There's money involved. Make a gzeira. For Rabbanan, what's the Rabbanan's opinion? The Rabbanan give a very interesting svara. The Rabbanan say you're allowed to do the bloodletting. Why? A person is concerned about his money. If you don't give him a legitimate alternative, then for sure he's going to make a mum. That's exactly the svara. The exact svara of that Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser is the reason why the Rabbanan say you're allowed to. Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser because you may end up doing it in the wrong place because Baal al Mamayne, maybe it's not working in it. The Rabbanan say no, you have to specifically allow him to do it in the right spot. Thank you. Because he may end up not being able to control himself and making a mum on purpose because he really needs he's concerned about the money. So we give him a heter, we give him a way of doing it. The Gemara now asks, do we say according to Rabbi Yehuda that a person is concerned about his money? But a person is concerned about his money, but that he was going to end up doing something wrong because of that. But we have a Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Ein Mekardin, Mekadrin or Mekardin, as the figure says. Habehema biyamtiv, nature chabura, aval mekartzifin. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can't scrape the soil or the dirt that goes onto an animal. You can't scrape it off the animal. It irritates the animal. You can't scrape it off, but you can scratch it off. We'll see in a minute what's the difference. You can't. Some say you can't do either. Vitanya, and we have a brisa that says What is the difference between scraping and scratching? Kider is katanim, va'isa chabura. A kider has finer teeth. When you do the scraping, that has finer teeth, which is going to possibly puncture the animal or make a mum in the animal. The issue isn't a mum. The issue is a chabura. It's going to make a scratch in the animal that's going to let blood. And kitzuf is gedolim enesed chabura. Whatever it is some sort of comb that the teeth are thicker. It's not going to make a scratch in the animal. The finer one would have made a scratch in the animal. This is just going to make a scratch. It's going to scratch, but not going to make a scratch. Okay, so what's our problem over here? I have a problem that my animal is suffering, and Rabbi Yehuda says that there's no gzeira. Maybe if it doesn't come off, you're going to use the other one. We said before that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that you may end up doing a mum, making a mum by the bloodletting in the bachar. And over here we say that we're not concerned that you're going to use the wrong instrument. When he answers Hassam, the Shavik Mayas, over there the animal was ill. If you don't do anything, it's possible going to die. So there we say Adam Bal al Mamayne. Hacha, the Shavik Tzar Bal Mahu. Over here, it's just going to be uncomfortable. So it's not Bal al Mamayne that he's going to need to do something. So therefore, it's just tzara. It's just uncomfortable. Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'ishna gabi chametz to gazer, Ma'ishna gabi kitzuf to gazer. Very interesting. Why by chametz did we make a gzeira, and over here by the scratching the animal we didn't make a gzeira? It says lechem belechem michlach. Kida bekitzuf michlach. Over there I have two types of bread. I have, depends what Pesach program you go to, but bread and bread. Their matzah was not hard and crispy that you could see the difference, and it was clearly over there. They had their matzah was like lafel, like a pizza. They just did it quick. So over there, it's interchangeable. It's not like so recognizable that you're gonna make a distinction. You're gonna see it. You're gonna eat it. You say, yeah, whatever. You won't recognize it right away, and it's possible that you're going to end up eating it. So that's why you don't make a bedika during the Zman Isser. But when it comes to using a different instrument to scratch the animal, so for that, it's mamish have to go get a different instrument. So that we don't make exam. But Meir, well, let's learn the Mishnah. The easy Mishnah. Meir says that the fifth hour of the day, you're allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat chametz. The sixth hour is that's when you burn. Now, really, the Zman Isser is the end of the sixth hour, but you start burning the beginning of the sixth hour. Rabbi Yehuda says no. You can only eat during the fourth hour. The fifth hour is interchangeable with the sixth hour, and you may not get it correct. So therefore, toilin kol chamish. Toilin means you delay, you pause, you let it hang. You don't do anything. We start from the streifa time is the same, beginning of the sixth hour. Rabbi Yehuda also says, there's two loaves of bread of the carbon taida. You only had one day to eat it, that were brought the day before. So now they're puzzle. Now they have to be burnt. You leave them on the itztaba. While they're up there, that's a sign for everyone is allowed to be eating. Nitlachas, once they take one down, that's like a yellow light, so then, Thailand, you said of to pause, you delay, you don't eat and you don't burn. Nitlushteim, once they both come down, then a schilakalam sarfim. I don't know if that's a red light or a green light, and everyone goes to burn. It's a red light, the fire. Everyone goes to burn it. Ram Gamliel agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, but he says that when it comes to truma, you're allowed to eat it during that time of limbo, that fifth hour, because you're not supposed to bring truma to psul. So therefore, we don't make a gzeira on that hour when it comes to truma. It's better the truma is supposed to be eaten. Okay, we'll leave it over here.